All right. Joining us here, special guest today, Cole Clark.
Yeah.
It's fun to be on that side of the desk now, huh?
I know, it's cool.
Yeah. So for those of you that don't know, we've been on a bit of a hiatus with our podcast. Cole Clark is a bit of a jack of all trades, and he come through our office for a hot stint and worked on our team, got a little bit of flavor of mortgage, and is now a realtor in the Flagstaff real estate.
Yeah.
And so I have so many questions, and I'd love to, and we prepped nothing as far as, I'm just excited to get into it to where now, where do I even start? Because you've been in sales, you have family that's in real estate. Now being in real estate, how many months has this been?
I got licensed in, I want to say like middle of January is when I was like licensed and hung it.
Okay. So pretty much it's been this year.
Yep.
Yeah, 2024, rocking it out. And it's very similar to that we talked about this. I got in the mortgage industry in 2008. So it's like the worst time ever. And people will probably say the same about what you've just done.
Yeah.
Of like, it's a very challenging time. I just looked at the year-over-year numbers. And you know, I know you can parse out different sections of the county and different things, but just looking at more of like the Flagstaff MLS is we've sold pretty much about the same homes this year or last year. It's very low growth, right? On just the number of sales, right? It's a very interesting market in a lot of different ways, but being then 6-7 months in, what's the most exciting thing that you're like, hey, I didn't even know this existed in real estate. Now I'm doing what's the cool part that you maybe didn't know, and what's maybe the like downside that you didn't know?
Oh man, the cool part that is
or what was better than expecting? What's worse than expected?
Better than expected is absolutely like you get something different every day.
Yeah.
It's like my ADHD brain gets to like re-experience something every single day.
Love
that's
it.
You know, like totally different and different challenges with every different home so far. And that is so much better, I think, for me.
Yeah.
Just in like how I operate and like just like things I enjoy.
Yeah.
The hardest part so far, at least the least expected so far, I mean, there's so much paperwork.
Oh, yeah.
Is like, you don't really think about it. You just think about like, you know, opening doors, showing it, connecting, doing consultations, and then like that's kind of it. You help people find the home, but it's like on the back end of things, the file work and the file management, and that's the unexpected bear of the industry.
I think we see a lot of, and being in the industry, we see a lot of that. We're digging through that. It's interesting to me how. And I guess playing a little bit into when, especially during the recent lawsuit, for those of you just joining us, you know, if you know about that or not, where people like to minimize the role. It's like, well, yeah, but the transacting six-figure type transaction with all sorts of due diligences and condition statements and all this without recourse. And it happens when it happens, it's great, you know, and it happens a lot of times without too much hiccup, but the paperwork, and we've had it where we've had people get into lawsuits from certain situations going down the transaction, not realizing that purchase contract is a legally binding contract. And that when they've gotten in lawsuits, and it's like, go to the paperwork, what did the paperwork say? And who was supposed to do what? And it's like, I've seen the paperwork like win, and it's the paperwork is important.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's a good responsibility. I mean, that's why you have a professional that you know is going through. I mean, the amount of training we've just done in the last 2 weeks, focused on all the new forms that are coming in. I mean, it's so extensive that that's why we're the professionals, and that's why, you know, people hire us to do what we do instead of, you know, trying to do it on their own. And there's a lot of, there's just so many more hidden steps than what you would imagine before you're getting into the industry that go along with the transaction to make sure it gets to the close date, which it's more difficult than a lot of the times it seems. It seems like, you know, you get a contract and then 30 days later it closes, and there's kind of a lot of background noise that convolutes things, but
Yeah, I'm just laughing too because I had a hilarious conversation where I was working with a relatively newer agent that did like what it had to be like the first, if not one of the first transactions she's done, like last month.
Yeah.
And and then we had another client that we were calling on, and it was, and we're fine hand holding a little bit. We obviously are not a broker. We do not advise them like their broker does, but it's hard in that sense where I'm like, I know what this needs to say or how this needs to work, but you need to go talk to your broker and it worked out. And she was, it was a very, very positive experience in that she was just open and humble about it, which is great. And then it was hilarious because she had another client that she put an offer in with, and then the list agent calls me and says, hey, so you're the lender on this, and just want to, we got this. We're going to counter at these terms. How does that sound? I was like, the only thing I'm going to repeat is on my pre-qualification letter of yes, we wanted seller concessions. They really need that. That is all I'm going to say. Wow. You need to talk to the agent. And so it's really funny because then the immediate thing that I do, right, is because we are not for those just listening, like I am not a negotiating party. I am not your real estate agent. I am not licensed to do that. And then my very next call was to the agent to say, hey, this just went down. I never want someone thinking like we're working some things out behind the scenes, because my client is the buyer, right? They have a representative that we work, in to assist with the permission of the buyer, but we're far removed from that list agent. And so it was funny because then this newer agent was like laughing and she's like, hey, I think that agent's a little newer than me. I was like, yep. So she's like, boom, I'm not the bottom of the totem pole anymore.
Yeah, there's some funny situations that even in the last 6 months that have come up that are just like, yeah, things are kind of weird sometimes, but
yeah,
I think it's just the nature of our, just like a nature of our business.
Well, that and I think, kind of as we just kind of tangent with that, is that's where I think you do have this kind of small town Flagstaff feel to it. And some people are like, good old boy. Like, but no, you got to keep it official. You got to keep it tight.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if we're best friends. If you're on the listing side, I know Cole, I'm still not going to say things to you that I shouldn't say to you. And that doesn't happen in all situations. Some people play the good old boy, and I think that's going, I don't know. I don't see that as often as I used to. Yeah. Used to be really bad.
Sometimes it's loosey-goosey and you hear about it, but.
Yeah. And, no. And so, so let's kind of get in. I haven't done a podcast in a while, so maybe it's cool to get into right now. Your first year in your real estate, but a lot of like nuance. I love that word to this market it's just like, and I've told people my anecdotal is to illustrate, and just very simply is like, hey, I'll have people in the same price point or similar price point go out on the same weekend. One of them comes back with the 20 grand sales price reduction and 10 grand in concessions. The other one lost out because they went against 5 offers.
Yep.
So like, what's happening, Cole? What's going on out there?
Isn't it funny? And it's like, and it's all I know now.
Oh, exactly.
I mean, like I have no other prior knowledge. Kind of the same thing that goes along with the lawsuit.
Yeah.
Is like, it's a weird situation, but it's almost kind of like a blessing in disguise.
Yeah.
That like, I don't have to learn any other way. It's like, I'm just going to go in with these expectations, and that's just how the industry is going to be now. But yeah, we've seen both. I've seen both cases, even just with my clients in the last 6 months.
Yeah.
Where I see, I have one client who's, found themselves in a really good position, a good offer, and they're getting enough concessions, and they're buying down their rate.
Yeah.
And everything kind of works out perfectly. And you're like, oh, that was easy. Like, how'd that happen so well? And then I got other clients, and, they want to put an offer in, and this home's been shown 20 times over the weekend. And, they have multiple. And you're like, why is this one? And sometimes you can see why. Sometimes you can see why a certain property is doing so well and other ones are not. But other times you're like, it's not really making sense sometimes.
And, well, I think it could be frustrating for a lot of people because you'd like to be able to have, and I always go back to this, right, is we're programmed, and I really think our conditioning or our programming very much from our consumer basis doesn't work well in markets, right? We like to say, hey, I want a TV, or I want a new pair of shoes, or I want this. Like, there's plenty of supply. I get to go pick online, parse out who's got a sale or whatever, and that's what I'll buy, right? Or whether it's groceries or our consumer goods standpoint doesn't deal with a constantly flux supply and demand. But that's essentially what I think. So you tell me what you think, but I think that's what it comes down to right now, is that it's a very finicky but very much there demand, and it just shifts like wild. Yep. Right. So you have less demand going on right now in general because of the interest rates. Right. And it's like, hey, on one particular weekend, who knows? It was good temperatures in Flagstaff. A lot of people from Phoenix were up. You had a lot of people from Flagstaff still up, enjoying the weekend, going out house shopping. That same house, you take, even though we don't have, that's the other part about Flagstaff too, is our inventory is not cookie cutter, but you take the same type of home, one weekend, there's 5 offers. Yep. You fast forward here into August or September, people are back in school. Yep. Scottsdale's feeling a little bit more, tolerable and not wanting to kill you with their temperatures. Yep. And that house could sit for 2 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely.
It frustrates people, but I get excited about that.
Yeah.
Because if you're patient,
there's deals to be had.
And persistent, I think that's both.
Yep.
There's deals to be had right now.
I tell everybody that I'm working with, I'm like, there's homes out there that they haven't, either when they listed or how they listed, they just didn't get the traction, and there's absolutely deals to be had. And there's homes right now that are just, they're just popping off and going off fast. It's like I planned out this big open house weekend over Memorial Day. And I thought Memorial Day was just going to crush. And I'm like, oh, everybody's going to be in town. And the open house is going to be massive. And then there's going to be buyers everywhere. And nothing. I'm like, why is Memorial Day not usually such a busy weekend for all these people to come in and look at houses and all this other stuff? Yeah. And it's kind of like what happened over that Memorial Day weekend. And then last weekend, nothing special going on. And we have another open house, and it's just off the walls. Really? It's 10, 15 parties coming through all the time, neighbors, people. And it's it really is just so temperamental or just particular.
Is it, so to educate myself and the general public here, do you see some price point markers on this?
In terms of what?
Do you see certain price points really moving versus not?
I think anything sub 550 is really pretty hot right now. You're kind of getting to that affordable. Yeah. I don't want to call it affordable, but first time people, reality. Nurses, teachers.
That's entry level Flagstaff.
Yes. Those move quick. And then I feel like everything that's kind of pushing over $1 million plus usually contains cash and cash buyers and kind of just the older demographic. I think the ones that are struggling the hardest right now are 7 to 950. It's that's a tough mortgage to pay, and you're usually not paying cash for it. And
I would say, at least in my just off the cuff on that, is that's your move up market, right? Yeah. And your lock in. I'll have to share this. Oh, you're coming tomorrow, right?
Yep.
Yes, perfect. We're gonna be talking about that tomorrow. The lock-in effect is, I think, directly related to that price point, right?
Which is what?
Oh, basically, people that have a home that they could sell for $500,000 to $600,000, move up to $700,000 to $900,000, but they have a sub 3 or 4,
right? And
it just doesn't make sense,
yeah,
right? And that's what's hard. I mean, just live today, I was sitting with it, and it'll be interesting to see here. So we'll show. I'll put this up on the screen here. So even though Cole hasn't seen this, but I love this data that just kind of gave a little bit of a basis of just saying, okay, if we especially dealing with this lock-in effect of folks that have really low interest rates, they're delaying life changes that would normally exist in the market, right? Whether they are ready to move down, right? They're elderly and want to move down, or they just had another kid and they want another bedroom, or whatever it may be, or that those folks are sticking in these homes, And I know this is an old talking point, but it's really cool to see of the chart that I'll share here. And I'd probably slaughter it. I should have looked at my homework and pulled this up here. But it shows of like when we get within a 2% of what their current rate is, like how many millions of people are then freed up from that lock-in effect, right? And so it's millions and millions of people. As we start to see interest rates reduce, that lock-in effect is also a factor that will play into to both opportunity and competition, all sorts of different things. But that sits dead in that 700 to 900 because, that's a move-it buyer that's not going to do it right now.
Yeah. And I mean, like, we're no fortune tellers, but, like, I think the general vibe is within our industry is as soon as we see any rate reductions and kind of cut down, it's just going to go ballistic. And and that's kind of like, I don't know, that's kind of just what I've been hearing.
Yeah.
Is just like everybody's take and like temperature of the market and buyers. And it feels like there's a lot of eyeballs on the market.
Yeah.
Just watching it. And as soon as it starts to break a little bit with interest rates, I think it's going to go pretty nuts.
And to talk on that, and not to like, some people get sensitive on this. And again, I think you framed it very well. We're not telling the future. We don't know what's going to happen here. But I would say for most folks to think, and this is kind of how we'll talk again tomorrow during a mastermind. We'll talk a lot more about how we're framing this. But to think, hey, if I was placing bets, if I was a betting person, I would bet on the slow and long. And that's exactly what the Fed is trying to accomplish, meaning rates come down. Let's say they come down 0.25% every 6 months, right? Yeah. And you look over then a course of 2 years, then we've just gotten down a full percent in interest rate per 2 years, right? And if that's really slow long, maybe it's a little faster, than that. That's 2%ish in 2 to 3 years. But then it's a matter of then saying, that's what I'd bet on, and just saying low and slow, and the Fed's right, and we don't head into this major or recession.
And that's the hope, right?
That's the hope.
The hope is
because if you look at that, then consumers slowly come back into market. People slowly then start to move out of their homes and move up, and the market kind of normalizes. I would say that is and just totally speculative here, based on then history here, is then if we kept a Democrat in the White House, I went this going there. If we kept a Democrat in the White House, that would probably have a more likelihood of playing out, because that's who's, I know the Fed is disconnected, air quotes for those just listening, but it's also like, that's the economic policy that presidential, or that current sitting president has held through, and they're going to probably try and stick to some guns there. Yeah. Whereas if we see a switch up, then I actually anticipate, now this is for better or for worse, so everyone listening, like, be careful what you wish for, right? So nonpartisan type comments here, but typically President Trump and Republican policy can be a little more inflationary, so they might be like, hey, let's try and like get back to some good old days faster, which, like you said, could, do we have lower rates faster? Which a lot of people think, like, please bring it on, let's bring this Band-Aid on, but I think that would be, that could have some consequences.
It would be a lot.
So I guess where I'm going with is it's like fasten your seatbelts too, to where, like, if you want, I don't know. So I like to come to like actionable conclusions.
Yep.
Let me know what you're doing. The Cole Clark take on this is because I'm like, if you want to play in a game that the rules, buy a house in the next 3 months. Yeah. Because after that,
it's gonna be the Wild West.
It could be very different.
Yeah.
And and that's what frustrates a lot of people, right? Because they don't know the rules anymore. Because they're like, oh, we didn't want to buy when the rates were 3% because prices were going crazy. Yep. And now rates are terrible. Prices haven't changed, so the rules of the game changed. And you're like, well, I don't like the rules to this game. I don't know where we get better rules. But that's the tough part. Is like you said, is you do come down in rate, and then all of a sudden the demand's up, but the prices are up again. Yep. So like, if you want to play by the rules that we've kind of like eased into for the last like 18 months, play now. Yep. Because the game changes.
Yeah. And who knows? I mean, it could change into just some wildness going on between, I don't know. And that kind of ropes in the whole, the whole lawsuit and buyer compensation and who's going to be paying the buyer's agent. I mean, that just kind of throws in like another curveball along with, if you kind of start to see the market really pick up again. It could just be weird. That's all.
Yeah.
It's kind of weird, different.
So let's talk directly about that.
Yeah.
And I think that it's a sensitive topic for a lot of people because they don't know how to unpack it.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I had a fun conversation with a buyer where their agent was kind of saying like, hey, we probably need to do this now because you're going to have to sign something else later. And I was like, I don't know if that's how I would package it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So if you were, I don't know, I'm sure you've been sitting in the office, been working on this, then dialing your approach where, so you're talking to a seller. How would you unpack what's going on? So again, lots of people maybe have heard about this, but lots of people, I think it's like 60% of surveyed people, it's like, it's an over majority just are not, they don't care. They're not in tune. They don't focus on real estate news every day. They don't care. What is the way that you're unpacking this change to people?
I mean, on the selling side of things, I'm making it very clear that, first of all, the conversation I'm having is that it's really not a massive change. Like, it's nothing radical in the form of they're not taking away like a co-broke commission. The only thing that's really changing about it is the advertising of it. So it not being advertised in our local MLSs, and then along with that, the only other kind of strange curveball they threw in there is that you have to have kind of a buyer broker signed before showing any homes. But even that is as far as like a temporary one home per use thing until they're, comfortable to continue working with you. So it's nothing really extreme like in the world changing besides, call it what you want. Some people think it's less transparent. Some people think it's more transparent. I think the lawsuit was kind of to be more transparent. And for some reason, it kind of feels a little bit less transparent or just.
Well, there's always unintended consequences.
Yeah.
With anytime, I always laugh in our world where they will have committees that will change disclosures to work to add transparency. And they've gone from 3 pages to 8. Yeah. How is that more transparent? How is that easier for a consumer to understand? So there's always unintended consequences with it. But I think it is important for people to know, no, this lawsuit did not cap anything. It did not make anything it did not. I should be careful. I said it did not make the earning of commission illegal. Right. It did not make the paying of commission illegal. It just is a matter of, and it was always.
You could always give zero.
It was always negotiable.
Yeah.
Right. We've known. I've known, and I should say this: in my 15 years of doing mortgage here in Flagstaff, I have seen once a buyer write a check to their agent. Once. Yeah. Right. And we've helped over 2,300 people. Yeah. And once did they actually write a check. Yep. Whereas every other time, some type of compensation through a listing agreement occurred. Will those probably be somewhat more prevalent? A little bit of more back and forth and probably. Yeah. I don't know.
I think my biggest conversations that I'm having with sellers right now is just right off the bat is just being openly transparent. And kind of going through the discussions of how everything was always negotiable. It's negotiable now. Nothing's changing there. And then just kind of laying out why they should offer a compensation to the co-broke. There's stats and there's reasons and there's things that you can dig up to show of why it's advantageous to be offering that. And it's just the standard of the industry. And not doing that, I don't know. I think something about Flagstaff locally with local agents, and I think everybody will kind of do their part in educating their sellers and their buyers of, why things the way they are, what we earn our commission for, the things that we put into it, and, why we are valuable to them and to be using them. Yeah. So I think everybody will be doing their part, and I don't see a lot of transactions being much different than how they are all the time they are now. Yeah. The only thing I ever see sort of changing, I'll be educating all of my sellers on why it's important and why it's valuable, and why we need to be offering a compensation to a buying party because it's important. Buyer's agents are super important to a transaction. I think we had Title come over and do kind of a little mastermind or seminar, and the failure rate of buyers representing themselves in a transaction is unbelievably high.
Yeah. And that's I think if anything, I encourage the use of real estate professionals, and I encourage the discernment of using top professionals. Yep. Right. And because whether it is a buyer representing themselves or whether it is and we've talked about this time and time again, at some point this will be too dated for me to call on, but like the 2012 NAR danger report, basically saying what's the most dangerous thing to the realtor profession is bad realtors, right? Yep. Uneducated, unprofessional realtors. And that's the hardest part and that's, again, when we were talking at the very beginning of what my role is, I'm in my role in a transaction. We don't always get to pick who we play with, and who we're working with. I should say, not everything's a game here, but we don't. And I'll be working with the buyer's agent that I'm like, they are totally whipping this listing or seller around. Right, like they're not executing timely with either their inspections or with me, and here we're going to be like 3 weeks down the road, and I can't even I can issue a pre-qualification letter based on a verbal conversation. Right. Documents come in and it changes. Yep. I could I asked for those documents day one, right. And if I'm sending you a loan status update showing that nothing's changed in 3 weeks, and you're a list agent and the buyer's agent's like nowhere to be found or something, right? Yeah. This is money, right? And like we're talking about in the finicky market that we are, like, hey, you listed on a hot, like your listing agent did their best, listed on a good weekend, or things worked out well, the stars aligned, you got a good offer, or you had a couple good offers going, but you had to let some go aside because now you're on this offer. And then all of a sudden that buyer's agent is just not, you could lose tens of thousands of dollars.
Well, and it's like real estate school 101 is the biggest word is fiduciary. Yeah. And, it's talked about a lot and it's funny, but if you're like properly representing people, then you'll never have an issue asking for your value to be shown in compensation on either side of the thing. Yep. If you're properly showing your value and why you do your job well and you're a professional, it won't even be a conversation. Yeah. I mean, if you are prepared and you know what you're doing and you have like the right people around you, then like you will show your value beyond any compensation.
And I think it's a little wild to me that real estate I think it's just so unfamiliar to a lot of people. Again, markets and the loan process and all these different things are so unfamiliar to people. They make choices, and you look at this statistically, Cole, they make choices primarily based off convenience and trust. And what is the statistic on how many real estate agents are chosen? It's over 50% of real estate agents are chosen because they either knew them or were referred directly from a friend to them. Yep. And so it's a massive referral type business, which, works really, really well for those people that do well and have positive word of mouth, but it also feeds a massive amount of unprofessional agents just because it's like, I'm not actually going to go out and interview anyone. I'm not going to ask who's a better professional. I'm not going to see who can best represent me. Right. I'm just going to choose like Bob, who's, my softball buddies.
Uncle's brother-in-law.
Yeah, whatever. Yep. But that, we're making jokes about it, but that's how a majority of real estate agents are selected. And I hope, if anything, this just brings more transparency to people to know you have the power to select your professional. Yep. And within that, there's always been two routes, and this will continue. It's as old as time, right? That you can pick a professional or you can pick a discount.
Yep. Well, and it's a funny thing about like our kind of as our like my generation starts coming into home buying, and I've helped out a couple of my buddies already kind of fulfill home ownership. But it's funny how, like, my generation and my sphere, they'll often they'll often just choose, the first option or the easiest option or the most convenient option.
Yeah.
Instead of, I don't know, I feel like maybe a generation behind us, maybe they kind of had the wherewithal to interview or speak with multiple or get their friend that actually bought a home, their recommendation on who they used. And, they kind of had, I don't know, it seems like so now it's just like instant first thing that pops up or first person or.
And I wonder if a lot of that too is also not so much like Gen Z versus millennial versus baby boomer or anything, but I wonder if a lot of that's just the experience, right? Where I do know a lot of people that on their second or third transaction were like, hey, I now know a little bit of what I'm doing. I still definitely want representation. And I know I'm going to ask about a couple people. Right. And I'm definitely not using so-and-so again, Because
there's some...
Or, or there's nothing special or, And so, I think that that's just so important. It's really wild to me that so many people don't go in asking questions or seeing, who do they jive with? And people, that's where if you are going to, so I guess, and I see this very, very, both in the lending world and in the real estate sales world of like, you should be asking those questions of what is the value brought and knowing that if you want to go for the lowest possible cost, that you get what you pay for and you are going to lose services. I've told a couple of people about my experience booking a Frontier flight.
Yeah.
I'm going to do it, Cole. I'm going to do it. But my mom is coming back from a long trip overseas. And so we're going to go visit mom. And so I was like, crap, I got to take all the kids because you don't want to take all the kids. And I was like, I'm going to go cheap this round. I'm going to go Frontier. And have you ever booked a Frontier flight?
No. Did the doors fall off your plane?
We're going to definitely buckle up. We are buckling up and holding hands or something. And so, maybe bring our own restraints if it's allowed.
Nice.
So,
I don't know if I've flown Frontier.
No, so they start out with this amazing, amazing price, right? And then it's like, okay, we have some packages. They might be cheaper for you. I'm like, well, let's forego the package. I'll a la carte this, right? And then it's like, oh, did you want to take a personal item? Or, no, personal items come with. It's like if you want to carry on.
Oh yeah.
Like you're gonna have to pay extra
$100
both ways. No, it's actually $65, but both ways is then $130. Nice. It's $130 for a carry on. Check bag, and then check bags. Every seat costs money if you're doing the lowest possible, and it's both ways. And if you want to talk to customer service, you got to pay an extra $20 per person per way.
Nice.
If you want to talk to customer service, if you use and so I don't know, it just is like
sounds horrid.
How it goes on. We're rolling the dice, honey. Well, they have
service,
and they have a 66% on time flight as of last year.
Very trustworthy.
Right? So hey, 66% of the time. And so I don't know. So it's like you gotta. So I love that analogy when it's like thinking of like, hey, like at the end of the day, I'm not actually paying much different.
Yep.
But the hassle and then the 66% rate. Yep. And then I've watched a few TikToks on people going through the line and getting their baggage measured and everything. It's like
the golf clubs get trashed and drivers broken in half.
That's where I'm like, people, like you gotta, I just think it's so important to just know, like, what do you really, really want?
Yep.
And understand that not everyone that's charging that is worth that. Yep. But the people that are saying, hey, I am a fully commissioned real estate agent. This is my fee. Yep. This is my service to you. Call my past clients. Look at my reviews. Yep. This, I can fully, clearly, and tangibly show my service level to you. Yep. I would really hesitate to go for to DIY it and just know you're losing money somewhere.
Yep. And I mean, shout out my mom, because I think in this local environment, like that's just tenfold.
Oh yeah.
I mean, the referral business and the word of mouth, and it's so funny. We were on that houseboat in Powell.
Yeah.
And on our trip, and she couldn't get her computer to work, her laptop. And she's like, she didn't know passwords or logins. I'm sorry.
We
Mom.
love you, Terry.
Sorry.
Love you, Terry.
She didn't know passwords or logins or internet or how to work anything on this laptop. And I'm like, how do you operate in your business And then she's like, people love me. So like, that's just what works.
And she knows the business.
She knows the business. Like,
yeah.
So deep.
Yeah.
And she's like, yeah. So I made a joke of it. I'm like, how do you get anything done on your laptop? Like, you can't even log into anything. And she's like, well, I do.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, you do. And it's really seriously just, I mean, it's like your book. It's just raving fans.
Yep.
You know, like it's just people talking about you, word of mouth, community.
Well, and because I think it's, dotting this all together there is it's knowing that the people that did, there's a bunch of people that picked like the discount broker or picked their the buddy's friend that wasn't vetted or whatever's going on here. And it's like, it's meh. Like hopefully they got into a home, because I do see it. And this is what kills me is I'll have identical clients, right? Qualifying the same range and everything. One picked agent A, one picked agent B. The one with agent B got frustrated. They're still looking around. They got kind of like disenfranchised with the market and everything, and they are renting, right? And rent went up, right? And agent, the one that picked agent A owns a home.
They're in it.
Understood that, hey, we can't have our cake and eat it too sometimes. They had to, deal with the market conditions. They had to have a learning curve through everything, but they own a home, right? And so I just, it's on that front to say, like the ones that know, like, oh, me making a decision and trusting my agent and working to understand the market, the negotiations, and building equity. And I'm here and I'm part of the club, right? Because I talk about it. And again, everyone, I disclaimer, I've used some of this verbiage before, and someone actually took offense to it a little bit, where I don't mean to call this a game or club, I don't mean to make light of this stuff, but to really, it's my way of just trying to bring the temperature down on things sometimes, but also to be like, once you own a home in Flagstaff, you're you're kind of fine with saying, like, although we hope it stays affordable for our friends, right? But to be able to say, like, you're okay.
It's like a club
with it growing in value.
You definitely sigh relief.
Yeah.
When it's done. And you're like, okay.
I got my foot, I'm on the boat.
Yep. It might sting a little for a little while, but you're like, at least I'm in and I made it, I didn't get left behind playing the music.
And that's the hardest part is I've just seen big life shifts made. And again, I want to make light of things a little bit, but I've seen massive life shifts and decisions of people having to get out because they didn't work with true professionals who and listen to advice and make decisions that got them into a position where they are secure. Right.
And it's incredible. It's like there's times I showed a house the other day to a brand new client. Never met them before. This is the first time meeting them. Showed them a house, was talking through, loan programs and kind of strategy. And they're talking about, should they offer this? Should they offer this much lower? Should they offer, how low can we offer it? And just within like a 10 or 15 minute conversation, we're talking about, like how payment sensitive their monthly is and how much even just like doing a buy down, like a rate buy down program, instead of coming straight off the top, what those savings look like month over month from a buy down program.
Yeah.
And I think they've toured. They said they toured with like 2 or 3 other agents through a house, and they've just like never heard of like that being an option. Never. Like it seems like they're like, oh yeah, we should just offer this, and then that's just what gets offered. And it's like if you really work out what their needs are, took a 15-minute conversation to figure out, are you really worried about this number, or are you going to be worried about what it's looking like month to month because interest rates are where they're at? And just within that conversation, talking about rate buy down, she's like, no one's ever told me about that. I didn't know that was a thing. And, they're 50, 60-year-old people that they've never just been educated by the right professional to even know that's a possibility to buy your interest rate down.
Yeah. Well, and just so much of right now of just things changing and relooking things that a lot of times you could get a lot closer to your goals than you think.
A lot closer.
Yeah.
Yep.
So no, I love it. I'm very optimistic. I just don't, if I was in some large area that's just being overbuilt right now, yeah, sure. Your values could be ebbing and flowing a little bit more, but no, I'm very optimistic about Flagstaff. And I just think a lot of folks could be more serious on saying, don't bet on some future that doesn't really, it's hard to project like things getting much better for you and then the next 3-4 months. Not that I'm trying to be like an alarmist like by now, but that's my take.
Absolutely. And like just proof of that is, I mean, how long have we been kind of in discussions, even when I was working here, about when are we going to see rate cuts? Are we going to see them in 3 months? Are we going to see them in next month? Are we going to see them next month? And they're still, you don't know. You could totally agree that it may just stay like this for whoever knows how long, because we have no idea.
Yep.
But it's better to get on the boat. That's for sure.
Oh, yeah. and again, you have to ride through some storms. Nothing was in a perfect line. But we're not talking about day trading. If you were talking to me about, hey, you want to buy a house and you're going to flip this and make some profit or something, unless you can show me the sweat equity you're going to put in the reno, don't talk to me, right? Like, we're just not going to see 20. I think the outliers can be gone, right? We're not going to see 10% drop in prices. We're not going to see 20% rise in prices, right? And so make long-term housing decisions. It's amazing, Cole. It's amazing. Yeah. So we're about this. Time flies in this room here. We're about at time, Cole. Any other major shout-outs, ideas for people? Anything else that people need to know from the brain of Cole Clark?
I don't think so. It's fun. It's a good time. Flagstaff's great.
Yep. Give him a call, friends. We'll post his contact here in the comments below. And thanks for joining us, Cole.
Cool. Sounds good. Thanks.